The Peculiar Tale of Jacob Miles, written by Tim Gritman, narrated by the author. Chapter 5. Nothing on the road had changed in front of me. The road was vacant of other travelers, save me being the solitary driver making my way home. I tried to dismiss this fear as irrational thought processes, simple paranoia, or random misfires of a few damaged neurons in my illogical mind. I had simply watched too many horror movies or something. I could not shake the feeling, and yet I couldn't explain it. Why was I afraid? This was silly. What had changed to cause this feeling? This is absolute nonsense. I was not in any danger. This was all my own overactive imagination to blame. I turned on the radio to try to distract myself and help put my overworked mind at ease. I turned up the volume, surprised not to hear any music. A faint hum of static is all that could be heard. I checked the station, tried hopping around on the tuner in case one of my favorite stations went off the air or something. Nothing. Absolutely nothing on any station except for a faint hum. It did not matter whether I was on an actual radio station I knew of or whether I was on a number that was between stations, as it were. This is just fantastic. Knowing my luck, my antenna came unhooked or something like that. That would be the perfect way to end an already awful day. I grabbed one of my favorite mix CDs from above the sun visor and pushed it into the CD player. Music began blaring out of the speakers and nearly gave me a heart attack. I had forgotten that I had the volume knob turned up so high trying to hear something from a non-existent radio station. As my favorite music filled the interior of my vehicle, I started to feel better. I couldn't quite shake that feeling of fear and dread, but the music was certainly helping. I tried to relax and slumped down slightly in my seat in an effort to relax my body. Suddenly, my headlights went out. Scratch that. All of my lights disappeared. They didn't just flick off like they would if you hit the switch, going from on to off like one would expect. Instead, the unexpected. They slowly dimmed to nothingness. It seemed as though the lights were attempting to covertly turn off, as if the lights were trying to secretly go on strike. My music CD had gone with the lights, slowly fading until I couldn't hear it anymore. Great. Not only do I have an antenna wire to fix, apparently my fuses need to be worked on too. Wait, all of my fuses? How could that work? I've never heard of all your fuses going out at once. That would seem too odd to be a coincidence. Besides, if it was a fuse, they wouldn't just dim, would they? At that moment, my car died and slowly crawled to a standstill. My car sat in the middle of the lane, as I didn't really plan far enough ahead to get my vehicle over to the shoulder. My vehicle would likely be hit by another vehicle if one came speeding down along the road with my vehicle currently lacking any type of lighting. I tried turning the key, and absolutely nothing happened. No life at all. Well, isn't this great? It would be a long walk home. Suddenly, that sense of fear and dread returned to the front of my mind with a vengeance, as if it were irritated that I had tried to push it from my mind. So, let me assess my situation. Dead car. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Now what? I grab my cell phone. No service. Of course, naturally, why not? Even though it said no service, I still dialed 911 in case such a priority call would still somehow find its way through. No luck. What a lovely way to end the day. As long as this fear was so present, I would scare myself into a heart attack in no time. Have you ever had one of those moments when you suddenly knew that you weren't alone? It became very apparent to me that I wasn't alone, although I would never have been able to explain why I knew that I wasn't alone, even if my life were dependent upon it. I quickly took an inspection of the interior of my vehicle, paranoia causing me to suspect that somehow I might find someone or something. I glanced from the unoccupied passenger seat and then peered into the back seat like I might find the monster Frankenstein back there, only to find the back seat empty, just as I knew it should be. I then inventoried my immediate surroundings outside of my dysfunctional car from my current viewpoint from the driver's seat. I scanned the highway, observing the pavement ahead of me, stretching for miles, disappearing in the distance, the lighted fence, and the ominous forest that glowered over the highway that dare cut through it. Everything outside of the car looked exactly as I expected it should. Nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing screamed danger at me. And yet, at the same time, everything screamed danger at me. Inside the car, my debilitated car with headlights and interior lights that don't work, a stereo that doesn't play, and of course, one very scared and hyperventilating occupant, me. I had to get out of this car now. I opened my car door, stepped out, and began falling. Falling into blackness, into darkness, into nothingness. Chapter 6. I couldn't tell you for sure how long I was falling, or even what I was falling into. I could feel wind rushing past my face. I could feel the weightlessness, but I couldn't see anything. There was absolutely nothing to see. Total and complete darkness, utter blackness. I remember screaming, taking a breath, and screaming more. I remember thinking that the distance I was falling was almost unimaginable, almost impossible. There were no holes in the ground next to my car. I was on a state highway, for crying out loud. I knew there might be potholes here and there, but this was ridiculous. Eventually, I would hit the bottom, and I would leave my last impression on whatever lucky surface lay beneath me. As I continued to fall, I tried to prepare myself for the brutal ending. I never have been a religious man, and I didn't think a prayer at this point would really help my case any. I began mourning the life I would never live, the life I would miss out on. I began mourning over Hillary, the knowledge that I would never be able to see her sweet face again, ripping my heart into pieces. They say your entire life flashes before your eyes in moments like this. I was never sure if I believed that or not. It's true to a certain extent. You don't remember the parts of your life you weren't proud of. You don't waste your precious few minutes thinking about the time you forgot to hand in that history report or that time you lied to your grandma. You spend your time thinking about the good things, the things in life that made you happy, the parts of your life that made you feel whole. You spend your time reminiscing on the parts of your life that you will truly miss, the parts that you long to live over again, even if only for a fleeting moment before the bitter end. As I opened each door in my mind, of the pleasant and joyous memories that I wanted to experience again. I began to notice that I could no longer feel the rush of air past my face. No longer could I hear any wind blowing past my ears. I still felt as though I was falling, but there was really no evidence to support that anymore. I was sure that the bottom of this blackness had been rushing up to greet me in a cruel and fatal embrace. It would seem now that this bottom did not exist. I was suspended, just hanging in midair in this void. Looking in every direction that I could move my head made absolutely no difference. Looking up, I couldn't even tell if there was an opening that I had fallen through. Everything looked exactly the same, no matter where you looked or where you turned. I couldn't even be positive with any kind of certainty which direction was up anymore. My senses began to malfunction. This place was entirely void of any type of sensation, and my senses were confused on a lack of input. There was nothing to focus on visually. I couldn't tell if I had my eyelids opened or closed. Little fuzzy blobs floated in front of my eyes, a result of my eyes attempting to make sense of their inability to focus on anything or even to get a visual stimulation of any kind. Without any auditory input, my ears began emitting a weird type of buzzing noise in protest to the lack of any type of sound to process. Nothing to smell, taste, feel. I could feel my own arms, and I was aware of the positioning of where one hand was in relation to the other. I was able to find my left wrist with my right hand without having to follow my arm from where it joined my body. This was a very peculiar sensation, very bizarre in every way. I began to panic. What was this? How long was it going to last? Would I ever get out of this void, or was any form of escape even possible? Was I doomed to remain here until I died of starvation or dehydration? Was this a naturally occurring phenomenon, or was this deliberately created by someone or something? What was the purpose of this? I once again had that strong feeling that I was not alone. I could feel someone or something nearby me, very close. There was nothing that I could see, nothing that I could hear, nothing that I could smell or feel that would have led me to this knowledge. It was simply that gut feeling that you feel deep inside that you are not alone. It was a very strong feeling, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end. "Is there anyone there?" I shouted. The noise of my own voice startled me, being in the vacuum of senses that I was. I waited for a response, although I couldn't tell you why. There probably wasn't anyone there, and yet every fiber of my being told me that there was someone there. Everything inside me told me that I was being watched, although I couldn't tell you for sure how I knew that. I held my breath, searching for some clue that might give me an answer. Sometimes you can trust your gut feelings, and sometimes you can't. Generally speaking, my gut feelings have been fairly reliable, and if they were ever wrong, they usually had the best of intentions. I could not shake this feeling. The more I thought about it, the more tense and anxious that I became. Somehow I felt like I was suddenly the center of some big science experiment. I began thinking that this is how lab rats must feel, and at that precise moment grew a whole new respect for anyone or anything at the center of lab experiments. Even though absolutely nothing had changed, I suddenly felt more cramped, as if the space I was floating in was shrinking. It was as if the membrane of this void was closing in on itself. The void was compacting into a size that probably would not be in my favor. There was no change in the information that my senses were giving me. My senses had not been heightened, nor had they discovered a different source of input. Yet I continued to feel as though things were getting smaller, as though my environment was shrinking and would soon collapse upon me. I began to panic. There was nothing I could do. There was nothing that I could grab onto, nothing that would allow me to move myself or help myself. I don't know why I felt like everything was closing in, but I swear to everything that I believe to be true that I would soon be crushed into nothing. The presence that I felt was still with me and seemed to be getting closer to me as well. As I have stated numerous times before, I couldn't see anything to support this, but I somehow knew this was true. I found it more and more difficult to breathe. I found myself gasping for air. Each new breath I sucked into my lungs felt like it was the last breath I would be able to breathe in. My own hands went to my throat as if they were trying to open up my airways to allow more precious oxygen into my lungs. With my last breath that I breathed before I lost consciousness, I felt freezing cold all over my body, all at once, instantaneously. My skin from all over my body quickly sent this sensory input to the brain, excited at long last to finally have something to report and tell me about what I was feeling. That's when I closed my eyes and accepted my death. Chapter 7. When I woke up, I felt very strange. I awoke to find myself somehow lying on a soft surface on my back. Quickly, my eyes fluttered open, anxious to see what I could see. I was in my bedroom. The boxes that Hillary and I had brought in were still stacked along the edges of the room. How did I get here? I had absolutely no recollection of how I had arrived here. In a burst of wild energy that could only be labeled as insanity, I jumped out of my bed and rushed over to the window and scanned the view outside my room. My car was sitting in the driveway in the exact spot that I had claimed as my parking spot. What the hell? I just stood there, looking out of the window, trying to piece this all together, trying to make sense of what happened. Had everything been imagined? Was I losing my mind? I didn't think I had an active enough imagination to possibly conjure up everything that I had experienced. My imagination would have been insufficient to come up with such extreme details. How did I get home? Did someone find me and bring me home? So many questions buzzing through my head, and no answers seemed to be readily available. I felt a powerful headache growing in response to the demand I placed on my brain to give me any kind of explanation. I felt a sudden chill all over. Goosebumps rose all over my body, and I felt someone's presence. I spun around, expecting to see someone. I was alone in my room. There was no one here, just me and my crazy senses. I opened the door and walked out of my room. Larry was in the kitchen, eating the breakfast of champions. He had a bowl of cereal, a glass of orange juice, and what appeared to be a stale donut. "Good morning, sunshine," Larry said, grinning. "Late night, was it?" What time did I get home last night?" I asked, sitting down at the table. I put my elbows on the table and put my head in my hands. I felt like I was going to be sick. "I don't know. I never heard you come in. Wow, did you get that wasted last night?" Larry asked. "You know, they'll rake you over the coals if they catch you behind the wheel like that," he advised. "I don't drink and drive, and I can't remember the last time I was actually what you would call wasted," I countered. "I'm not that dumb to get behind the wheel. I would never put anyone in danger like that." Okay, relax. I was just teasing you." His expression immediately changed, mocking to serious after evaluating my reaction. "What happened last night? You don't look so good." Larry was genuinely concerned by this point. He leaned towards me and pulled one of my hands away from my face so that he could see me as I answered him. I don't remember how I got home," I muttered. I didn't know whether I dare reveal any of what I did remember, at least not yet. This was insane. Somehow, after all that I had experienced, or thought I had experienced, I ended up at home with my car in the driveway. I was seriously losing my marbles now. Just how much could I trust my memory to be recalling accurate information? "You better go lay down," Larry advised. "I don't think you're in any kind of condition to be moving around right now." Maybe you're right," I surrendered. I hated feeling helpless, feeling like I couldn't take care of myself. As much as I hated it, I let Larry help me up from the table and walk me back to my room after my first attempt to stand up from the table left me feeling dizzy and lightheaded. I collapsed face first into the soft embrace of my bed and passed out.